my generation, and I'm sorry, this sounds a little biased about a couple things, but in my generation, I think is less susceptible to what I call hoarding the tribal knowledge. I think that you'll have a younger crowd that will be like, oh no, I figured this out. I'm going to keep it to myself. Or I was working on this and it's, it move fast and break things and I don't have time to document it and I don't have whatever. And so the next thing you know, you get a new hire and they're suffering because you've got a big ramp up because you have tribal knowledge you have to go try to dig out of somebody's head. Well, somebody who's like me, who's been on enough teams to know that that's just horseshit.
Welcome to It Gets Late Early. Today I have with me Vern 6, and Vern has had a wild, week and a half now?
2 weeks. Yeah.
Couple weeks. So Vern is a 37-year veteran of the tech industry. He is the founder, right, of Purpose Brew Coffee.
Right.
Yep. Side hustle turned full time with a job loss. That's same. My podcast was a side hustle turned full time because bye job. So here we are. But Vern had this post that went absolutely viral on LinkedIn, just like nuts. And so he's here to share what exactly he said and what has happened to him in the 2 weeks since he posted this. So Vern, thanks so much for being here. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory of that. It's just really kind of funny. Just basically my career has been 37 years of 3 month to 4 year engagements. I've always been kind of an augmentation to whatever the staff was somewhere, and would join the staff just as though I were a full time employee. The only difference is how they paid me, right? They paid me on 1099 versus a W-2. So I take care of all my own insurance, all the rest of that stuff. So on February 1st, we actually closed on buying 34 acres adjacent to our 7-acre land, and basically just trying to keep a mobile home subdivision from moving in. And so that was at 3:00. At 4:20, I received a phone call from my client that they had a catastrophic weather event that collapsed one of their buildings. And, they're up in Iowa, and I'd been with them for 4 years. And basically, long story short, that was an hour and 20 minutes after I just made myself cash poor during the closing.
Yeah, that is so brutal.
And taking a hundreds of thousands of dollars mortgage. So yeah, it was pretty wild.
That's
and
horrible.
So and I was working away, and like often happens when you put the open for work banner on your deal on LinkedIn, I get this phone call. His name was Jason, and I'm not going to out him, but because a lot of people have asked me to out him, but I'm not going to do that. And so he called, said he had seen my resume and wanted to talk. And I said, sure, now's a good time. Let's visit. So then he pulls up my LinkedIn in the middle of the conversation. It just abruptly changed. I mean, it just was like, dude, how old are you? And I'm like, really? Did you just ask that question? And so I told him, and he's like, well, you're at your age, I'm surprised you're not a CTO or something. That's what the first thing my clients are going to ask. And, I can't pitch you. I mean, you're what, you're going to retire when? And at that point I was pretty incensed. Probably doing shit that my mom would not be proud of. And,
I get it. I want to throw things at the wall hearing the story too.
I'm an old soldier, so inventing a cuss word when needed is not beyond my my skill set.
And I worked in sales with a bunch of guys, so I'm with you.
Yeah. And so we had a quick abrupt end to our conversation.
Wow.
It's funny though, just a quick tangent. When the post went viral, the little prick reached out to me and was begging me not to out him. And I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful.
I know, right? And I've had several people, I mean, hundreds of people. I've got over 200 letters from attorneys that have
they're like, please let me represent you.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And see, that's the thing, is that that's just not who I am. I don't need karma that way around me. I mean, whether I'm going to be a part of him getting good, a piece of bad karma coming back to him, or whether I'm going to be getting my own karma for outing him, it's just not my style. I just move on, because I kind of viewed it like, don't shoot the messenger. If this kid has got the balls to say it, then let's just go with it. And so I I'm not going to sue him. I'm not going to, file a complaint or anything else. And like I say, this morning I have 68,000 emails in my inbox at
Oh
Vern
my
at
gosh.
vern6.com. And,
I'm glad I got
I'm,
through.
yeah, well, you reached me on,
Thank you.
I think you reached me on my
I did on
personal, yeah,
LinkedIn. Yeah.
yeah. And then even on there, I've got, I'm up to like 10,000 connections, and I was at 2,000 before this all happened.
This has been
And so,
great.
yeah, it's been unique, and not many job interviews so much, but
We'll get you
it's been
there.
a frenzy of other interviews. And so it's kind of unique, and that, it's kind of surreal to me. Really, I've never had a post go viral, but yeah. And so he was just real worried about me outing him. Everybody's wanting me to name and shame him, and
I know
you know,
people do that.
yeah, and I'm not that guy. I mean, I don't care,
Yeah, I
and,
don't feel
and
about it.
I just, yeah, how's that put any good into the world? It doesn't. I don't need him to support my family and my way of life, and it would destroy his career. I mean, there's no
Well,
question. I
and
mean,
yeah, he's probably fairly young and inexperienced, and he clearly doesn't have any sense of what what the world's like yet, and the fact that it's lost on him the fact that he will one day, if he's lucky, be in your shoes himself. So, and the WHO says that 1 in 2 people is ageist. Like
yeah,
this is a super
absolutely.
persistent problem throughout society. I know I myself was ageist. I figured it out. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm ageist and I'm doing this podcast. Like I'm working on myself, and it's not our fault because we've been told this from the moment we were born, pretty much. So
Yeah, and I think there are some really profound reasons for it. I think that social media plays the biggest part in it. I think that we are such a post on social media to get the likes and the views and all the rest of that stuff, and everybody posts what I call their A reel. Nobody does any of the B reel, and I think we're constantly looking for the next thing. I mean, it reminds me of the whole Avicii song, "These Nights." You remember that song? It's about it's just about him living life large and all the rest of it.
I
I think
don't
that that's
remember
the
that
way that
song.
that's
That's
a
pretty
great
cool.
song. I liked his music, but
Yeah.
his life ended way tragically way too early.
Oh, wait,
But
Avicii's no longer with us? I did not even realize that.
yeah, he killed himself.
Wow. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, he was the
Jeez.
constant seeker in my world. He was just kind of a seeker and just never found what he was seeking, and yeah, he killed
Hmm,
himself. But
that's so sad.
he might be overdosed or something. It might have been an accident. But yeah, the what either way. But my point is the song that really resonates with me is just kind of so sums up all of the social media that I see so much of is that
Yeah.
it's let's post this, let's live large, let's do all these things. And I remember at other companies in my 40s they would have events that the coworkers would do and stuff, like going to an axe throwing bar or going out to whatever. I'm sorry. I'm the guy who probably is not gonna go to do those things. You wanna go on my bass boat? Come on, let's go. But it's not the same, it's not the same set. So I mean, I am different, but my point was I was able to see so much of those sorts of events happen that where I would just not even be invited. And I'm a hell of a nice guy, but I mean, it's just, but they're not going to invite me to that crowd. I'm not going to be the oldest person in an axe throwing bar or something like that, or I'm not
You
going to
could show
go.
him a thing or two.
Yeah,
You did
well,
show up, right?
exactly. But I'm not going to show up to the rock climbing wall that they're all going to tomorrow, or whatever.
Mm-mm.
And so,
No.
I saw a lot of that where it just wasn't invited. Now, I think it's funny that at his age group, supposedly the most inclusive generation we've ever had, is let's just include everybody, is just absolutely hypocritical. I mean, we're not including anybody. Now, that being said, I do want to call out that I had one young lady who worked for me. Her name was Piper, and Piper was amazing. She was her first job out of college. She came to work for me at a major manufacturing company as a front end developer. She was awesome, and whenever they had anything going on, she just always made sure I was invited, whether I was going to go or not. And so, so it's not just a generation thing, but I think that it's more prevalent than what we would want to admit, and I think it happens every single day. And discrimination period does. I mean, I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've been involved or been a party to or listened to conversation in the workplace about women in tech. And golly, I'm like, guys, this is career-ending discussion. Y'all need to stop, and I hundreds and
Thank
hundreds
you,
of
by the
times
way.
I've seen that,
Thank
and
you
it's just,
for
yeah,
speaking up
you're
for
welcome.
us.
Any type of discrimination just pisses me off.
Well, you and me both. And, ageism has the one element that it's coming for everybody, right?
It's the only one
And
that's
there was
accepted.
this,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's pretty much the only one that is socially accepted. And that's the issue. People don't even know that it's wrong. And
right.
it's casually thrown about so easily. People are so careless about it. And I know I used to be that way too. I mean, I used to not be aware of it. And I actually have to say, like, I believe I'm only aware of it because I'm now, I'm an elder millennial. So I am getting out of the darling status in terms of what everybody wants to hire, right? The millennials are the vaunted generation. And now it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm over 40. It's weird. The recruiters stopped calling me. Like the calls were coming all the time. And then I turned 40 and boom, off a cliff. It's like, there's definitely something there. I mean, this is happening. It's real.
No doubt.
Um,
Yeah, and I've often heard them. Clients that I've had have, where I've been involved in discussions where they're like, "Let's get the old guy to tell us what he thinks about that." I mean, I can't tell you how many times to my
yeah,
face that's
yeah.
happened, and it's just kind of, on one hand, it's kind of flattering to say, okay, he's got enough experience, we want it,
Yeah.
and let's get his input on what our risk is with X platform or Y platform or whatever it may be. But on the other hand, it's just pretty damn insulting.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, old is four-letter word in the society, and I'm telling you, like, my kids think it's a sick burn. My kids are 6 and 8, and they are like, "Mom, you're old." I'm like,
Yeah,
"Where did this come from?" Like, I've
yeah,
never said that
yeah,
disparagingly of anyone, and this is just it's such an undercurrent in society. So, it's going to take quite some time for us to get out of our own way on this, and it starts with us all individually. But to your point, this is rampant in corporate.
it
This
is.
is rampant in tech. And
Yep.
belonging is such a huge part, inclusion and belonging, such a huge part of organizations today. At least that's what they say, right? But
Right,
when it comes down to it, it's up to the top of the organization to recognize that you need to have people represented up and down the ladder, across the organization, across the hierarchy, right?
right,
Of different characteristics and different sorts of specifics, right? So you need to have people of every age. That includes age diversity should be a part of the picture. And unfortunately, PwC did a report, and it's only 8% of organizations right now that include age as one of the characteristics that they hire
right.
for, and they ensure that there is representation. So we've got a long way to go. But I
For
will
sure.
say the very fact that your post went viral, that it
It's
resonated with
crazy.
so many people, it went nuts,
Yeah.
absolutely
And it was
nuts.
just such an off the cuff. I mean, I purposely chose the word whippersnapper in that deal to choose the oldest sounding word. I mean, I actually went to Chat
It was
GPT and said, "Give me
brilliant.
the
It made me laugh.
I said, give me the oldest sounding word to describe a youthful young man," and that was what it came back with. And
Actually, they're
so,
right. It's a good
yeah,
one.
it was
Chat
just
Chat
funny. But
GPT.
you know, um, one more thing though about the whole corporate culture and all the rest of the stuff. There's some economic stuff that's driving it too. I mean, there
Hmm.
corporations have been long been known to do whatever, they have a financial responsibility to their stakeholders, right? And they're going to
Shareholder
do
value
whatever.
creation and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so
That's why I wake
they
up every day.
and so they they're going to go with somebody they can pay 50 grand versus somebody who's a principal senior engineer that they have to pay 200. I mean, and
Mhm.
so it's just it's pretty much kind of just goes with as your normal progression of your salary goes up over time, and they just kind of look the other way and say, well, we can't afford that, let's just go deal with this over here at 50, and they get somebody who's like this guy, the Jason guy, that's just wet behind the ears. And it just, so I so on one hand you can kind of understand it, and the other hand it's
Mhm.
like, okay, you're going to miss some of the things that I learned. I'm bringing a toolbox in between my ears.
Yep.
I'm bringing a toolbox that kid didn't have. And
100%.
yeah, and so it's hard to make them understand that. And And the other
Money
thing,
will.
well, and that's just it. I mean, once they start understanding that not all hours are created equal, my hours are significantly worth more now than they were 30 years ago. And yeah, yeah. And so it's it's a hard battle to win, but I think we make a change. I created that little group on LinkedIn to talk about the explosion of it all. The post has over 2 million impressions, and since Saturday when I created the group, I created that the group called Inclusive Futures, fighting the battle against ageism and discrimination. There are 300 plus members in there right now. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, I didn't know about your podcast, but I mean, it's obvious that there's a need for that. And I've had, I've even had folks from TED reach out, and there's a lot of stuff going on that I'm like, wow, this really resonated. And it wasn't even a well-written post. I mean, it was just me just flying off the handle, being funny, saying,
But it
can you
was
believe
raw.
this
It
little
was
shit?
real.
Yeah, I was like, can you
Yeah.
believe this little shithead? And it was just funny how it's taken off.
I think it's awesome. It's awesome. You're giving a voice to a lot of people who are feeling this.
I've gotten several people that have reached out to me that are just wonderful. I mean, I've gotten some hate mail. I've gotten tons of hate mail. I've gotten, I probably have over
What's the hate
150.
mail say?
Oh, go off and die in a corner somewhere, old man. That
Oh,
was the one I just
that's
read.
lovely. Nice.
You're too old to react. Can you imagine a game written by you? What is it, Parcheesi? Stuff like that. Yeah, stuff like that. And so it's just kind of interesting to me that how those people were. But on the other hand, I had a recruiter from a company called Insight Global that reached out to me, who not even was my recruiter. I worked with another recruiter over there a lot. And this young lady called, and she was just practically in tears. She was just like, I just hate this. I just wanted to give you a virtual hug. And it was funny because it was like, she was obviously, a mid-20s young lady. And I thought it was really sweet. But I received so many calls that, my number that's on my resume has always been a voice over IP number. And I just sent it strictly to voicemail right now because I'm getting hundreds of calls a day, and 68,000 messages. And this morning, I don't know what it is now, that was this morning, but I've gotten probably a couple hundred that I've read of those from attorneys, a couple hundred from women asking me out on dates, to several that have been obviously illegal activities that say you need to have some extra money.
Oh,
I'm like, it's just,
interesting.
yeah, it's,
Wow, the internet's a really weird place, isn't it?
oh my God. Yeah, for sure.
Like what? That was not how I was expecting that to go. But I think the reason your post captured so much attention was that it was raw and it was real, and you're speaking something that so many people are feeling. And that's why, I mean, the audience response that I've had too, people reaching out like, thank you for doing this, right? Like, because there is so much gaslighting that's happening right now, and people, this is not something that people typically want to stand up and talk about openly. Like, it's kind of hard to market a podcast about getting older, because then in order to share it, as one of my friends says, well, gosh, I want to share it with this older woman at my company, but how do I send it to her without being like, hey, I noticed you're older, right? Like, I thought you might like this, right? Because right now it's still not something that people are very proud of, right?
It's better than the damn alternative,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I keep saying. I'm like, dude, plan B sucks way more, right? So you
Exactly.
get it,
I'm still
but
vertical.
yes, exactly. This is the goal, guys. And for women, it's even worse, right? Because we're not supposed to, after 35, we're damaged goods, right? So it's just it's a mess. But your post touched people because it was just really raw, and I love that you didn't call out the person who said it, because that person, whoever he is, there are a million more like him, unfortunately. And I have heard countless people reach out and say, I was told, fat chance of you getting a job in tech after 50, good luck to you. You've reached, director at these huge companies. You're doing great. You keep climbing the career ladder, but you're screwed. And what you said about his assertion about you being a CTO by now, I've heard
I,
actual
I
leaders say
actually
this out
was a
loud.
CTO before. That's what's so funny.
Oh, well, and that's even funnier, right? So then they probably look down on you because you moved back down. But guess what? Being a CTO isn't for everyone. It's not.
That's right. It wasn't for
And
me.
there's supply and demand.
Yeah. I don't mind
There's
managing
not
people. I
enough
don't like
room.
to manage people in tech.
Yeah.
I
Why
mean,
do you think, I want to ask you this. Why do you think that it's so bad in tech? And do you think it's specific to tech, or where else would you see this kind of rampant ageism, or have you heard from peers?
I mean, I don't know. I have a friend that we just got off the phone before you and I started talking, who's a doctor. He was a psychiatrist, and he and I were just kind of visiting. He's like, would you want a surgeon who's 25 to work on your brain, or would you want somebody who's 58 and has done it 1,000 times? I mean, so it's really kind of, in that regard, I think it's unique to tech.
Yep.
And it's really kind of frustrating in a lot of ways. But I think that people just kind of think that you have to be on the new cutting edge because our industry changes so much. I think about the
It does.
technology. I've been a remote worker for 37 years,
Wow.
long before the whole COVID nonsense. And whatever your political views are, I don't care. COVID was pain in the ass for everybody.
I have PTSD.
Yeah, right. For sure. And so it was just kind of a major pain, but a lot of people started working remotely when COVID happened. I was doing that way back when, before all the cool tools. We didn't have Riverside, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have, we didn't even have Skype.
Cool tools.
Exactly.
Zoom.
But my point being is that our industry has changed so much. I think back to the days when I used to write, DOS applications way back before Windows was even released. And,
Mm.
and and coding in such a way that hell, I go back further than that. I go back to my COBOL days, carrying a holograph deck
Look at that.
of
Y2K, right?
of, of stacks of punch cards, and crying when I dropped a stack of 4,000 cards that I didn't put the sorting bits on. But yeah, that sucked bad. But but my point is that I think because we change so much that they think that old people just never change. And I think that that's, how many times we look at our kids and, you know, I don't know about you. My youngest son is 30, my oldest son is 40, and I have another 38 in the middle. And just our musical tastes, our activities, all the rest of the things, they're going to describe dad as pretty set, and in a lot of ways that's true. And I think that spills over, unfortunately, to tech, and it doesn't have to. I mean, it's certainly not true in my world when it comes to tech. I mean, yeah, I love the old technology of the lamp stack, which is PHP in those days. It's still 45 to 55% of the internet, depending on which stat you listen to. But there's other things too, like Python and C# and .NET and all those things that I can do as well. And people just think that once you're kind of pigeonholed in a particular stack, that's the way you are, and that's the way you're not going to move away from it. And it's just not true. And so I think it just happens as a normal progression of life, is that older folks kind of stay their way. I mean, like I say, I'm not going to go to the axe throwing. I'd go to the bass tournament, but that's and
But you want to be invited regardless.
damn right I do. Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
Show those
And
whippersnappers how to throw that axe, right?
exactly. I'm an old sergeant in the military, so I can definitely do some of that. But
I would
yeah,
love to see that.
yeah, it's just crazy. But and I'm not sure how we fix it. I mean, it's I think that there's a couple things we have to attack. I think we have to attack that not every hour is the same. We all bring different toolboxes to the table, and that's worth something, and that's worth a lot of money in a lot of cases. Because if we're going to talk about cybersecurity, I promise you I'm going to run the circles around most in his generation that think that they're cybersecurity experts. I mean, I've seen it.
You've been
I've I've,
around.
I've
Yeah.
watched it, exactly, and I've been there through some remediation of some serious cyber attacks at some financial institutions.
Wow.
And that
We need
didn't
experience there.
exact
We need
exactly.
a range of people. It's just like any other form of diversity, really. And I'm heartened by the fact that there is some more research being done. In fact, by one of my past guests, who's at the London School of Economics at the Inclusion Institute, and his name's Daniel Jolles, and they're doing a set of research in tandem with a company called Protivity, and they're looking at the productivity of intergenerational teams, and that's what's going to change the game, right? If we can get some raw data, like this is a ones and zeros business, right? Like they want data. And so there's tons of anecdotal evidence and survey evidence from people in the tech industry about ageism and about the need for age diversity and change. But again, unless we get that raw data, those numbers that indicate that there's actually some shareholder value creation being left on the table if we don't have an age diverse team, like it's not going to change for all the reasons we've discussed, right? So I think step one is awareness, which is again why I think that your posts, like people actually sharing this information openly, is so critically important. I've had multiple people who haven't been able to talk on the record to me, and I understand completely. And interestingly, it's usually women who won't talk about it, and so there's a variety of
Yeah,
reasons
that's
behind that too.
unfortunate.
It
Yeah.
is. And, ageism is worse for women. There was even a recent case where a group out of China called iTutor was summarily dismissing candidates if they were 55 as women,
Oh,
and
wow.
they let people be 60 if they were men. So, I mean, even
Yeah,
there,
that's
there's an example,
crazy.
right? It's nuts. But I think that awareness is so massive, and having the ability to be vulnerable and share something like that, like you did, it really touched a nerve, and it did so for a reason because it is very real. And so I'm really grateful to you for sparking that conversation, because this needs to move out from the shadows and into the open. It's just we're all getting older every day. This is going to hit absolutely everyone
Yeah, if we're lucky. Yeah, we're all gonna
if
get
we're
older.
lucky.
Yeah,
And for women, we get it our whole lives. So they had new data that
that
showed that
sucks.
women are
Yeah.
basically either too young or too old in the eyes of many. And 80% of women have seen or experienced ageism at work. One way, too young, too old, right? Never just right. Just like, what is it,
Yeah.
like Goldilocks or something?
Yeah,
but
it's
so,
exactly, and that's
but
crazy. I
this
mean,
is where it starts.
yeah, I think that part of what, in terms of, having an age diverse team is that you can bring some of those people along and not necessarily have to suffer the school of hard knocks. I mean, when I worked for a bank and saw the bank, being taken over by a hacker, I mean, oh my gosh, that was like, oh, what are we learning? We're learning some really powerful stuff. Now, granted, that technology was old back in the day, but it was, even today, I can tell you all kinds of horror stories. And so it's like having somebody who's has been around that and can educate and can, you know, can help with that. The other thing is too, is that my generation, and I'm sorry, this sounds a little biased about a couple things, but the in my generation, I think is less susceptible to what I call hoarding the tribal knowledge. I think that you'll have a younger crowd that will be like, oh no, I figured this out. I'm going to keep it to myself. Or I was working on this, and it's it move fast and break things, and I don't have time to document it, and I don't have whatever. And so the next thing you know, you get a new hire, and they're suffering because you've got a big ramp up because you have tribal knowledge. You have to go try to dig out of somebody's head. Well, somebody who's like me, who's been on enough teams to know that that's just horseshit. That we need to actually have that documented and have that way to go and learn how to share that is really the only way everybody succeeds, and not the least of which is your fiduciary responsibility to the person paying your salary. And it's to me, I think that that's probably one of the biggest traits that I've seen that are different generationally speaking. Other than like I say, the whole they want to claim that they're inclusive of this and that, and gay this and woke that and whatever. They're all inclusive of all that stuff, but they're not inclusive of like you say, women over age or men of my age. And I think all of those need to be included. And I think that,
Hmm.
and I think that that's just kind of a generational thing also. A lot of people in my generation, maybe they don't agree with some of those being included, and that's unfortunate. But I think that, the people who've always had a firm feeling of where they are and what their worth is have always included everybody. And I think that
Hmm.
that's really kind of in some ways a lashing out of toward whatever the bias is. And I think that's really unfortunate. I mean, if you look at it, how many studies have been done that prove that the reason women were always discriminated against is because they threatened the status quo. They threatened, in the mindset of the old stuffy CEO somewhere. That's a story that's been told a million times. I think the same is true in this regard. I think that old people are kind of viewed, like I say, that being staunch and in their set in their ways, and then
Hmm.
also that they're kind of intimidating. It's like, why would I want to slow down and do documentation and boring tasks? I want to go be the front of the bleeding edge programmer. If it was hard to read, it ought to be hard to understand mindset. And it's like, well, that's not how you build a team. How you build a team
Hmm.
is you do code reviews, you do share that knowledge. It's not just tribal knowledge.
I want to ask you this because I worked on the sales side of the house. I couldn't code to save my life. I mean, it would be an utter disaster. So I've been curious about the difference in perception on age bias when it comes to more technical roles versus roles more on the sales and marketing side of the house.
One of my best friends his name is Glenn. He's on the sales side. He's the account manager for a large consultancy, and I think he experiences a lot less of it than I would. And he's got just as much gray hair as I do. And because it's you want somebody there who, in that mindset, you're like, okay, this is an older fella. He's going to be consulting with me, doing something with me. I'm not painting by the hour. I'm not, that sort of thing. And so I think they view him as a trusted advocate for whatever the company is that's going to go through him to hire people like me, basically because he's at an agency. And so he would be somebody that, would place me at a company or a contract role. And so I think people would view him differently. I think the businesses do that a lot. Whereas they see somebody like me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can get 15 kids in here for $35 an hour. I got to pay Vern $1.50," and so it's like how that all works is a mystery to me. But I think that there is definitely a disconnect in that. I think that it's people don't see it that way. Now, what's really funny is that if you told somebody you were going to give them a flat rate in tech, let's just say for whatever reason, I don't do flat rates very often because there's a constant scope creep. But if you were going to design a particular product, you said, I'm going to do this for $100,000, it kind of goes away. They really don't care. And in fact, at that point, they kind of want the older guy. At that point, they want to make sure they're getting the bang for their buck. So I think they recognize that they're getting something that is valuable. But when you're charging by the hour, it's like, okay, this old guy, how fast is he? He can't run, he can't keep up, those sorts of things. I think the mindset shifts dramatically. And in my mind, I have some solid documentation to that fact.
Wow. Yeah, no, that tracks. I mean, I've always kind of had the gut sense, and that was the case. I think when it comes to sales and partnerships and marketing, that sort of thing, I think it's probably a different ball game for women as they age versus men. I hate I
Yeah,
hate to say that, but I truly believe that to my core. But
right.
I think you're
I agree
right.
with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I often thought to myself, am I picking the right horse here? Like, am I going in the right industry if I'm in partnerships and sales and that side of the house? I cannot imagine a world in which they would want to hire me over a 30-year-old woman, right? At some point. Like, that always seemed to me like a losing proposition for me as I got older, which is another can of worms that we can't really get into today,
Right,
but
right.
has certainly been the subject of some of my past episodes, and I'm sure some of my future. But it is interesting to think about the difference between the tech roles and the sales roles, and whether
Yeah,
that differs on gender too, right? So,
that's
but I
crazy.
absolutely believe what you've just
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
Before we actually kicked off the recording, you were talking about how you always, were able to find work. And I want to hear at what point that changed for you, and have you share a little bit about your path.
Sure. Like I say, my career's been 37 years of 3 month to 4 year engagements. I've always been a staff, augmentation person where I've actually joined a staff just like I were an employee. And day to day, it'd be the same thing. No difference between me being working for, Corsicana Mattress Company, which is one of the companies I used to work for, working for them full time as a full time employee. You would not know any difference. Anybody who ever saw me would never know that I was a contractor. And which is funny because that presents its own questions. Like, well, if you're a contractor, why would you ever want to be a full time employee? But that's a whole other story. But the my day to day was that. So until February 1st, the day we closed on this property, I'd been with this company, this other company that out of Boulder that I'd been with for 4 years. And when they had a weather event and had to do some quick downsizing to compensate for it, had to get let go. And there were several people that, got scaled back.
Sorry.
And that's the first time in my career that I've ever had longer than 24-hour period that I haven't been on a contract. If contracts come and go a lot, CEOs change, CTOs change, and next thing you know, the company goes a different direction. They reevaluate a contract. They opt for their buyout of the contract, or they just decide to end it. and abruptly in some cases. And, I've seen entire departments, 15, 20 people, just all let go because the CTO changed. I've seen that in my career multiple times. And I've been the recipient of that, but I've never not had a role by the end of the next business day.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this is now what we're 5 weeks in. So that's kind of why I went back to, my wife and I, we were full, not to wear my religion on my sleeve because I talk like a sailor, but we actually went on mission and lived in Guatemala, and we were, we lived there for a couple of years and helped build an orphanage. And I worked remotely during that whole time too. People didn't even know I was out of the country. And our whole life has been about trying to, do better in the world than bad. And so we created this company in 2021 that, Purpose Brewed Coffee, which is a fundraising company to help primarily nonprofit organizations raise funds. And so I just kind of been piddling with it. And so it's been, we've got 13 or 14 clients, and, it just kind of maintains itself. It's certainly not enough to support me at its current, rate, but it will at some point, probably within a couple of months, it'll be more than supporting what I need. Cause right now I'm living off savings. Right. And so it's just it's interesting to see it grow. And, in just the 5 weeks, I've added 9 new clients
Oh,
to it.
that's great.
So yeah, so it's been great. And so we've almost doubled the size of the company since 2021, and so it's going to go well. And I think that that's funny because a lot of it, I was just burning hours to, and dollars paying, other junior developers. I'll use that term to talk about skill set, not age. Junior developers that, would do some of the tech burden for me. Well, during this 5 weeks, I've eliminated the need for that. I've automated a lot of that. I've spent my, my tech chops, doing what I need to do, spending my tech savvy, doing what I need to do to make it as automated as a process as possible. Our whole company, basically, we create a website for a particular entity. Let's say, for instance, Gonzalez Dog Adoptions is a company, a nonprofit dog rescue facility in Gonzales, Texas. And they just went live with us. And, to make that process automated as possible, it wasn't being done before. And I could see from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur as well, I could see what needed to be done to make that process quicker. And so now I can take that process that normally would take a week or two of me paying a junior developer. It's now a 2-hour deal. And I can have a client online in 2 hours. And so that's a big deal. And so it's a 5-week period. I mean, I'm still looking to go do some more tech stuff somewhere else just to carry me for that and I'd absolutely tell your viewers, hey, I would absolutely take a job right now for 3 months. But
You
it's
guys
just
listening?
yeah,
Let's get
exactly.
Vern a job.
Yeah, exactly. 3 months, 3 years. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm always going to be tech related, and so ultimately, I think that Purpose Brewed Coffee will probably be what carries me well into retirement.
That's
It's
awesome.
a
I
unique
love that.
model. Yeah, it's a unique model, and I think that
It sounds it.
yeah,
We're
it makes
definitely
money,
going to
and it
link
doesn't
it
cost
in
him
our show
anything.
notes.
Yeah, it doesn't cost them anything. We set up the website for free. We host it for free. We do the white labeling of all of our coffee products for free to
Wow.
match their branding. If they don't have any branding, we'll create some of their branding for them. That's the only process that takes longer than 2 hours. And then basically we create a website that sells the coffee. They push it to their supporters, and then they get 30%, which is huge. 30% of every bag that sells, and we ship it directly to the customer. You don't have to,
Very
school
cool.
used to sell popcorn and candy bars and, cookie dough and all this stuff. They get like 2 to 4% usually. And then
Yeah.
then the kids
Wow.
got to go deliver it all, and you have to have volunteers. We don't
It's
do
hard
any of that.
work.
It's like push the website to your viewers, give them to your supporters, give them a QR code if you have to. Every time they adopt a dog, give them a QR code to order some coffee. And we sell everything on subscription. So they can cancel at any time, but they basically, they get recurring, and it's great coffee. It's award-winning coffee on several of our coffees. We have 60 different single source coffees. And so
Wow. You're busy.
my wife and I have been very busy with it over the last 5 weeks, especially. Prior to that, I just kind of piddled, and hired people to do a lot of the work. And well, now there's no need to hire them if I got all the free time to do it. I don't have much
And
free
you
time
got all the
today.
free
It's
time.
crazy. You're the sixth
Yeah, it sounds
interview
like it.
today.
Wow. Well, I think that's fantastic. I am thrilled. I mean, I'm not thrilled you're going through what you're going through. I'm not thrilled that this podcast even has to exist or that a post like yours would take off the way in which it did
No,
because
I
it
get
means
it.
there's a real problem.
I understand
However,
exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
so happy that you're out there spreading this message because I think it's really critically important. And for you to be able to share this openly is big. And a lot of people struggle with that. I want to ask you, when did you start fearing or worrying about ageism, or did it hit you out of nowhere?
I've often said to my wife, I said, I'm kind of becoming a dinosaur, and,
Mm,
in response to, just being excluded from some of the younger folks going to social events in the office, at my clients over the years. And I would say probably 40, I'm 58.
wow.
And I would say I kind of saw that handwriting a little bit. And I think that it's become significantly worse in the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's, again, I think it's attributed to the things we've already spoken about, but I think it absolutely, is worse now than it was. And I think
And
the number one catalyst for that is social media.
that's really an interesting take. And I'm curious, is this something that you have spoken about with your peers openly? Have your friends and you had these discussions, or is this something that you kind of held internally and concerned yourself with, but not necessarily spoken about up until your viral post?
I would say the extent of my discussions have been defending somebody who was dismissed in a hiring uh, meeting. In other words, I've been in a lot of interviews. I do a lot of technical vetting. In fact, a lot of recruiters hire me just to vet candidates. And so I've had conversations with my clients where they've needed to form a team, and they were like, "Oh, that person's so old." I'm like, here I am sitting there in front of them with gray hair
You're
like
like,
crazy.
hello.
Exactly. And, and you think that person can keep up and those sorts of things. So I've been in there being an advocate for them. I'm like, he's younger than me. What the hell are you talking about? And he's got the experience to do this, this, and that. And so I'd have to bring to the table a lot of that sort of digging down and selling of the can. I mean, I should have been a damn recruiter, but to basically just explain what that person brings to the table, and what the value proposition
Translate.
is. And so
Yeah.
I've seen that for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been in conversations where people have been dismissed because it's like, he's only going to be here 3 years. I'm like, what full-time employee in tech lasts more than 3 years mostly?
Exactly.
They move, and
Doesn't happen.
and people just don't
In
understand
fact,
that. Yeah,
yeah, and in fact, I actually read that the older employees are the ones who stay longer than younger
absolutely, no
employees. So
doubt.
it's like
Because
they're they're not doing this right. So
yeah,
I think there needs to
exactly.
be a lot more education, a lot more awareness. I mean, it's almost been laughable when I've gone through trainings for, sexual harassment and other sorts of HR programs. And ageism, if it comes up at all, is like one line. It's it. And or the little skit they have on their, the terribly acted skits that they have in these HR programs behind the scenes. It's like, hey, old guy, should Tim have said old guy? Yes or no? It's like that's how much of a caricature it is of what's happening. And it's just there needs to be the doors need to be blown off on this because this is happening. It's real. And so again,
One of my biggest pet peeves, it's funny you would mention, hey, old guy, that sort of thing, is with is with LinkedIn itself. Have you
oh
seen their
God.
have you seen their latest ad campaigns?
Uh yes, it is offensive.
It is
It
highly
is
offensive. Yeah.
deeply offensive.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's like, I'm reading this one here. Your mom
Outrageous.
might not understand B2B audiences, but
Yeah.
people on LinkedIn do. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did you just say
Oh yeah.
that? Yeah,
It
and
was crazy.
they've
And do
been
you see
running
the
these
one where they're
ads,
like
8 or 9 of
the
them that are just,
clouds?
yeah, what's that?
The one that did you see the one with the woman who's older, she's got, silver hair and she's like, "My son works in something in the clouds. He works." And it's like, "Are you kidding me, LinkedIn?
Yeah.
You're actually
Yeah,
putting this up here?" It's
LinkedIn's getting
outrageous.
LinkedIn's getting highly offensive, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
so much
bad.
so that, I mean, I pay what,
So
$43 a
bad.
month for my my LinkedIn subscription. I'm probably
So
going to
you
tell
can
them
see
to
who
piss.
looked at your profile.
Yeah,
It's like, what is this giving me? Like, what?
exactly. I'm probably going to tell them to piss up a rope. But
I mean, I'm
sorry,
pretty
another
close
old expression.
myself. You're all good. I mean, whippersnapper. But
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, after seeing that particular ad, I was like, I mean, this is
It's
outrageous. And
insane. Yeah, no, it's
it's the
crazy.
largest professional network in the world. It's owned by Microsoft, and they think that this is a cool advertisement. Like, sub women in, sub people of color, sub anyone else in for that advertisement, it would never,
Oh, I
ever
know.
fly.
I don't
It's
know how
wild.
I don't know how they got away with it. I'm gonna send you, by the way, I'm gonna just use LinkedIn real quick. I'm gonna send you this I don't know if you've seen this particular one, but it's really
Please send it.
it's so offensive, and it's LinkedIn. I'm
Yeah.
grabbing it right now, and
It's outrageous. It's awful. But I do think that the only way
you
this
should
will
have it
change
now.
is if we have, thank you, is if we have conversations like this out in the open, not behind closed doors, not, with ourselves and our own internal monologue, but actually out. So
Absolutely.
again, I think the fact that you threw an off the cuff comment out there on LinkedIn and
I
it
was
got
just trying to
picked
be a
up, it just
smartass. That's what's so funny.
well, and you did great with it. I loved it when I saw it. I was like, this is
Whippersnapper.
hilarious. Whippersnapper. I was like, everyone gets what you're doing. It's
Wait, I
hilarious.
forgot.
But
That's what it's so funny. I got so many people. Not to interrupt. I'm so sorry. I've got so many
no,
people
you're
who've taken
fine.
offense at the word whippersnapper. Say, like, you're pretty prejudiced yourself. I'm like,
Oh my
I'm like, you
gosh.
dick. I just
You're
created
like,
that word. I used that
exactly.
word to be funny, and so it's
Exactly.
just
Like, have you ever
hilarious.
heard of sarcasm?
Exactly.
Clearly. Like, come on, people. I know. I'm sure my words get twisted all the time too, but I'm just like, no, the whippersnapper was hilarious and it actually made the post, if you're asking me,
Yeah,
which you
I
weren't
thought I did
necessarily,
too.
but
Thank
I
you.
loved it.
I'm
I
glad.
loved it. I'm definitely going to link your coffee company, so Purpose
Awesome.
Brew
Thank you so
Coffee,
much.
your LinkedIn profile. So we're gonna get you a job, Vern, if you want
That's
one. I
it,
think,
baby.
I mean,
I do.
I'm all in on Purpose Brew,
That's it.
but
That's cool. I
we
appreciate you
could
so
also
much.
get you a job. I
That's what.
appreciate you. This has been super fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of
And
fun.
I'm really
It's a
grateful
great
that,
cap to a very busy day. You've been
oh,
the most
good.
enjoyable interview I've had today. So it's just been kind of fun.
Oh,
Well, because we're just being real, using real language and not being stuffy, and it's just a lot of fun. It's just being real, and I like that.
well, you're very welcome. I'm really appreciative of you coming on with short notice
You bet.
and sharing what you did with the world. So thank you. I
You
really, I
bet.
mean, it's so important. So thank you so much, Vern.